Thank you. I appreciate the time and the opportunity to come to Romania and speak. As many of you know, I've been in Romania for many years now, and I love the country, so it's, to have the forum here is a wonderful event for me personally. Pavel, this has been an outstanding conference overall. We have set a new bar for the forum. Congressman Pittenger and I were discussing that with the board today. I have a unique role. I serve on the board with Congressman Pittenger, and I found it interesting. When I first met Congressman Pittenger, he was my congressman in North Carolina in the United States, and someone asked me to go meet with him and discuss counterterrorism, and I did because he was my congressman. And then we became friends, and then I would go assist him as a friend. And then, after learning about him and working with him for so many years, I've discovered he's a really good man. So now I work with him simply because I love him, and his heart is in the right place always, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's a pleasure to serve on the board and be involved with this at a deeper level. We're talking about illicit money and illicit finance and activity. And I found it interesting. Yesterday we spoke about so many topics, and we always talk about so many topics, but we really didn't talk very much about following the money. So I go to many meetings on this topic, and I'm sure all of my colleagues would agree. Follow the money, and you will find the problem. Sometimes it's that simple. So we want to complicate things. We want to do this, and it's like follow the money, follow the money, follow the money. So it's kind of, I go to meetings sometimes with 20 different people and 30 different people and from different departments, different countries, and everybody talks for 7 or 8 hours. At the end of the meeting, I simply say, follow the money, and I leave. Sometimes it's that simple. But as humans, we always want to be looking at things. But one of the main things that we were talking about is reshaping the global security map. And I'm going to speak with Robert about the neurological warfare, because you really need to have that topic involved if we're going to look at global security maps and what's going on in neurological warfare. And there is ways to use analytical data and money to be looking at neurological warfare and who's conducting it and where. But rather than get into that in depth, what I'm going to do, since it's later in the day and we have a large group here, I'm going to shorten my remarks very quickly. Then perhaps we'll go to my colleague from Romania. Second, my colleague from the FBI would be wonderful. Then my brother from Ukraine, Andreas, and then Sylvia. And then if we keep our comments relatively short, we'd love to participate with all of you, because this is such an interesting topic that we want to find out what you want to talk about. Senator Pressler, Larry Pressler, asked me this morning. He says, clearly, you guys are against China and against Russia. But he said something very interesting. He said, what are you for? We should all be asking ourselves, what do we want to represent? What are we for? It's easy to say what we're against. It's very difficult to say what you're for. I'm for fairness, law and order, freedom, and democracy. Mark Davis was talking about this in a brilliant way, probably much better than I can. We should be looking for and trying to do business with like-minded people. And when we're sitting down, we should be looking at money flows. We should be looking at investment types. We should be looking at locations and where does a democracy need us to trade. One of the things I find in my profession as a risk management consultant, we tend to be de-risking from a lot of different democracies. We're de-risking from Belize in the United States. We're de-risking from Central American countries. We're de-risking from Middle Eastern countries. I'm not sure we should always be de-risking from somebody that we should be moving to. I could give you an example in several countries that I've seen de-risking from the G20 or G7 countries, and I visit these countries and I'm there, and as soon as they're de-risked, I see China and Russia assets, and I see China and Russia investing in those countries as soon as we de-risk. That's not really the intent of it. What we should be doing is looking at the lights of the world, and General really taught me something very interesting, looking at the looms of each of the cities and around the world. And when a city starts to get dark, we shouldn't be de-risking. We should be looking at that city saying, how can we invest more? How can we be looking at the assets that are being traded there, the people that are being traded there, and how do we help them and assist them. The other thing that we have to be looking at is investment types, not just investment locations. I remember 15, 20 years ago, everybody said, oh, prepaid cards are the worst thing in the world. Oh, okay, now prepaid cards are all over the world and they're generally accepted. Crypto is now the worst thing in the world. When I traded gold and oil, that was the worst thing in the world. Like, how do we accept reasonable assets and work with business to be able to monitor them and regulate them, and versus saying this entire investment product is super high risk and we shouldn't allow it. What we should be doing is working with businesses to see what is the asset, how is it moved, what's the quickness and the velocity of the money associated with, and what type of people are looking for it, so we could come up with behavioral patterns. And that's what a lot of our colleagues do here, and that's what we should be doing more of, not less of, and just saying, well, if you trade these assets, you're a bad person. It's not that hard to look at the client types, and Sylvia is going to be talking about this, but we have a huge issue with beneficial ownership. I've seen it over the last 3 or 4 years. When you look at beneficial ownership, and a lot of countries are saying, well, you have to look at beneficial ownership of 25%. So somebody owned 25% or more. Sometimes it's 10%. What's very interesting is when you go to 8% and you see that the Military Bank of China owns 7% of millions of companies around the world. But you have to be able to look at this in a different way. There's no one number that works for ownership, and official ownership, so I'm sorry. And we need to discuss this more, and hopefully that some of our colleagues here will do that. I had more notes, but I see we have a larger group that are very intelligent people, way smarter than I am, so what I'm going to do is yield my time. We'll start with my Romanian friend, and we'll go across. And then hopefully we have time at the end to ask really to get some participation from the audience. Sir?